Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head back to Ireland for the first time in quite a wee while actually. It's been a good 6 months or so since I reviewed my last Irish beer for you here on the channel. So for this one we're going to go to Dublin and we're having a taste of my first beer from Stone Barrel Brewing. So this one is their Mojo IPA and it comes in at 6% ABV. Now this one was a little bit of a surprise to me. This is another beer that I brought at Kiosk over in Copenhagen, and you know, I always used to say in my Irish beer reviews, even in Scotland it was pretty much impossible up until about a year, maybe 2 years ago, to actually get a hold of Irish craft beers. They were like gold dust, and they just didn't seem to make it outside of Ireland at all. So to come across this one when I was in Kiosk about a week ago now was really surprising, and I guess it shows you how many steps forward the Irish craft beer market's taken over the last little while. So I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. The guys in Kiosk said that it was a really nice beer, so here's hoping it is, and I'm sure I'll enjoy reviewing this one for you, and I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Stone Barrel Brewing, hopefully. This is the very first time I've come across one of their beers. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Irish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, or added to whenever I get the opportunity, because it's still quite difficult to get a hold of some of these Irish beers. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Stone Barrel Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So Stone Barrel Brewing were founded back in November 2013 by Niall Fitzgerald and Kevin McKinney. So both of these guys had been homebrewing for a number of years before deciding that they wanted to turn professional, and actually they started up their company and based it in Dublin. So both Niall and Kevin had previously worked in accounts and finance at a couple of different big companies, and the two actually met during the banking boom in Ireland when they worked together. So Niall apparently went away to travel the world, and when he got back he found that Kev had found himself very enthralled in home brewing. So they continued to explore this hobby, kept experimenting with lots of different beers, and eventually they entered one of their beers in a festival and won a bronze medal, and this really prompted them to kind of further explore opening up their own company. They were apparently pestering lots of other little microbreweries around Ireland trying to get information about setting up their own company. But at the moment both are actually very actively involved in the brewery. They're doing all sorts of different things. So they're doing the accounting, the financing, all of the brewing and stuff like that themselves actually. But they're brewing their beers currently at the Third Barrel Brewery out in the Bluebell Estate, which is out to the west of the city, and as of early 2018 they've brewed around 15 or so different varieties of beer according to Untappd. So it seems to be another brewery on the rise. The other one that we're hearing a lot of from Ireland these days is Whiplash Brewing, who obviously are doing some very nice beers. I've not reviewed one from them in quite a wee while actually, so that's a brewery that I do need to get back to. But as I say, the thing that was really cool about this beer was just to find it in Copenhagen of all places. You know, Copenhagen has a very strong beer scene, so to find an Irish beer making its way over here, I thought was very cool. Like I say, even in Scotland back at home, it's still quite difficult to get a hold of some of the Irish beers, Whiplash aside of course. So yeah, that's all you really need to know about the brewery just now. That was all the information I could really find on these guys at the moment, but if you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out the brewery website. It's got some profiles of the different beers that they do. And of course you can follow them on Facebook and Untappd and Instagram and things like that, and keep up to date with all the latest goings on there. But yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself then. So this one is a 6% New England style IPA. It's hopped with Denali, Eldorado and also Victoria's Secret hops, and apparently this one's been fermented with a sort of triple mixture of yeast. They've got 2 New England IPA yeasts in here and also a German Hefeweizen yeast as well, which should be really interesting. Eldorado, of course, that's a hop. It seems to be coming back into popularity recently. This is an American hop that was released back in 2010. It gives you a little bit of kind of pineapple, mango, mainly pineapple from what I remember, and it can also give you a little bit of a sort of watermelony pear flavour as well. And Denali is one that I've had 1 or 2 beers I've had one or two beers, and Denali's an interesting one. This was a hop that was brewed, bred, sorry, between Zeus, Nugget and another American variety, and it's quite an interesting one. It gives you quite a lot of pineapple, it's got a lot of pine resin as well, and I do remember the beer that I had from Track Brewing in Manchester. I remember it having a sort of kiwi-ish flavour to it as well. But yeah, two interesting hops. This one, Victoria's Secret, is just like the little brother or little sister of Galaxy a bit, so it's kind of got a passion fruity pineapple note to it as well, so I'm expecting that this beer will have a good little bit of a kind of pineapple-y punch to it. But that's all you need to know about the beer just now. We can get on to the actual tasting itself. So I'll just let you have a little quick look at the artwork there on this one before we open it up. I have to say the artwork is pretty cool, and to be honest, there was a couple of beers actually in Kiosk from this brewery, and I pretty much picked this one just because I liked the artwork. There was about 3 of them there, and I thought, well, I'll take one. This one's got the coolest artwork, and I think the other one might have been a sour beer actually, or something like that. Or I think I maybe chose this one as well because it was an IPA rather than a paleo. But there you can see Mojo on the back, nicely presented. You can see the Danish recycle sticker. About a 6% New England IPA, as I said, this one, and it just tells you, you know, little bits and bobs about the beer there. But without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. The one thing I'm noticing that is quite cool in this, they do have the sort of typical Irish 4-leaf clover sort of thing, so I'm guessing the fact that they've used this as their symbol is to sort of market to the Americans and things like that as an Irish craft beer. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. So yeah, as I say, very, very cool to see Irish craft beers making their way out here to Scandinavia. That's the very first one I've seen from some of the smaller breweries, right enough. So hopefully it's not the last. Maybe these guys will get out to some of the beer festivals. And I'll tell you straight away, as soon as you open up this beer, you do smell some of that lovely tropical fruit out of this beer. You can get pineapple off this one straight away, but there is a little bit of a mango-y kind of quality in there as well. So yeah, if I hold this beer up to the light, it is a nice kind of murky orangey yellow colour, this one. It is somewhere in the middle of the spectrum between the orangey and yellow notes. You can see there's a solid 1.5 finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head on this one. That one probably will fade down a little bit as we go through the beer, but 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a couple of little ones heading up towards the bottom of that head there, and if I put my fingers behind the glass you can see just how hazy this particular beer is. It looks absolutely lovely, this actually. It's one of the more hazy New England IPAs that I've come across recently. But let's take a closer look at that aroma and just see how we get on with the beer. Yeah. So straight away with this one, as I was picking up when you brought this beer out, it's pineapple. Definitely just a little bit of pineapple. There is a little touch of a kind of mango-y note to this one. As we said, you know, that's the El Dorado that's probably going to give you that, but you can pick up a little touch of the passion fruity notes as well. But the mango and the passion fruit will come a little bit from the Victoria's Secret hop as well. And you can smell this beer. It's got an interesting thing. I mean, I always find with IPAs and stuff like that, you get the main fruits of the hops, which are the kind of punchy, more outgoing ones. For me, this one's straight up pineapple, but all 3 of the hops in this one, the Denali, the El Dorado, and the Victoria's Secret, they will all kind of contribute a pineapple component to this beer, so it isn't surprising that that is most prominent. There's a little touch of a mango note in this one. As I said, it almost has a little tiny kind of tangerine-y quality to it as well, which is quite interesting. But you can pick up some of these almost watermelon-y pear complexities that you would get out of the Denali hop. There's almost a little touch of a kind of kiwi note to this one. As I say, for some reason when I first encountered Denali, it was in Track Brewing Company in Manchester when I was there, and it really just reminded me of kiwi. But yeah, with this beer you can smell that there's a nice there is a nice sort of floral aromaticity to it. It does have a good little bit of a spicy quality to it as well. Some danker notes, or more dank notes rather, from from some piney resins as well. But to me, the grassy side of this or the green side of the hops in this beer really lean a little bit more towards the sort of floral aromatic side of things. There is a little touch of grassiness in there, but really it's leaning towards a more kind of spicy floral aromatic note, which works for it very, very nicely. In terms of the malt base then, I would say you know, this beer actually smells slightly sweet. It has a nice big oaty creaminess. Some of these New England IPAs, they can lean a little bit more towards the wheaty side of things. For me, this one's leaning a little bit more towards the oaty, creamy side of the beer. You can pick up a little bit of that wheaty smoothness underneath, but the oats in this one are very creamy, and it's almost slightly sweet, to be honest with you. Maybe a teeny little bit of a biscuity note in there, but that's quite minimal for me. The malt base in this one, yeah, for me the malt base in this one is all about the oats, definitely. And when you sugar this beer up, actually, you can get a little bit, it does gives you this waft of, it really does give you this waft of a slightly earthy floral aromatic note to it. The green, when you put your nose into that one a little bit more closely after sugaring up, you really do start to get some of those kind of fresh, it's almost like zingy green notes out of it. But the aroma on this beer really is quite interesting. It's got that lovely juicy fruity quality you'd expect. As I said, pineapples, little touch of passion fruit I think in there from the Victoria's Secret, a bit of mango as well, and you've got those almost watermelony peary esters coming out of some of the complexities of these hops. So just take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think this one is going to be really quite interesting. So without further ado, let's have a taste at this beer. So this one is the Mojo IPA, New England IPA, coming in at 6% ABV from Stone Barrel Brewing, based in Dublin over in Ireland. My first Irish craft beer, I guess, that I've bought here in Scandinavia, aside one or two which aren't so much craft beers, more traditional. But let's get stuck into this one. Sláinte, skål. Yeah, I have to say that is pretty nice actually. First thing I'm noticing about the flavour is a little bit different from what I was expecting from the aroma. The malt base is leaning a little bit more towards the wheaty side of things in this one. It does have a little bit of a graininess to it as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, once you take a sip or two of this beer, it really does start to bring the flavours out a little bit more. First thing I'm noticing about this beer as well is the big piney resins from the Denali. I remember the Denali having this really distinctive piney quality, and it's interesting that the Denali is one of these hops that you can probably use, and it almost gives the impression of being a slightly higher IBU than the beer actually is. This reminds me of a lot of the really dank piney resin qualities that you would get in some of the West Coast IPAs. That's the impression I'm getting of this one. So if you miss those big, dank, piney resin qualities, then this is a New England IPA that probably would fill a corner for you actually. It's an interesting one. I like how this is going together, and it's one that definitely is testing my palate a little bit. I think this is quite interesting. So let's try and break this flavour down a little bit then. Middle of your palate, you can just feel that the middle of your tongue is just blanketed with this sort of white bready, wheaty quality. That just goes right out and smooths the middle of your tongue. The palate dries out a little bit the further you go into this beer, and you do start to get a little touch of graininess in there. There's a sort of oaty, creamy feel to this one, which is quite nice. And as I say, the creaminess, I was expecting the creaminess, the oaty creaminess to be very, very prominent in this one, particularly when you think about the aroma. There is a little touch of a biscuity note in the middle of your palate there, and it does sweeten up the further you go into the aftertaste as well. And the more that you drink of this beer, actually, the more the middle of your palate adjusts to the nice malt base that this beer has. Yeah, I do like how that kind of goes together. I guess that the sort of drier part of the malt base blends in well with the nice sort of piney resinous character that you get from the Denali hop in this one. It really is interesting. So back corners of the palate, you've got a nice kind of slightly darker earthiness in there, but the pine resins really take over the side of your palate there. It really is interesting. As I said, the way that the Denali is kind of jumping in and just taking control of the green side of the beer, and this one's really interesting. It really does remind me of some of these very dank, high IBU West Coast IPAs. I'm not sure exactly what the IBUs of this beer would be, to be honest with you. I don't think it even says on the can. But this one, I would say that this beer is a little bit higher in IBUs compared to some of the other New England IPAs. I mean, I think we're maybe talking around 40, maybe could even be a push, be a sort of 50 IBU beer, this one. But I certainly like how that kind of comes together. I will admit, when I first tried the Denali hop, it's one that I wasn't really convinced by. To me, it came across as it was almost like a kind of kiwi-ish flavour, as I said, and it had this big, almost dusty, resiny quality to it, which I wasn't that keen on. So I think this is one of the hops that I still need to try a few more beers with it and just see if I can get it to grow on me a little bit. But in terms of this beer, when you're pairing it with other hops, I think it works very well. The other beer that I had was a single hop Denali, and I think this is. I think, in fairness with it, I think that's maybe the problem. That was maybe the problem with that beer. I don't think the Denali is one that you can just kind of have on its own. I think you really have to pair it with other things, and just let it kind of shine that way, and try and use it as a sort of to give you a little bit of that fruity quality, but also to give you some sort of that kind of dankness, if you like. But it's a very interesting quality that it has, with those big piney resinous notes. So yeah, around the front curve of your palate as well, you've got a nice little bit of a lighter sort of grassy note to this beer as well, and you can pick up a little bit of a floral quality in this one too. But as I say, big piney resins on the sides of your tongue here. Maybe it's more of a floral note, a kind of spicy floral note at that, though, on the front corners of your palate. But as I say, behind the front curve of the tongue, that's where you get that nice oily bubble, where those juicy fruity esters start to come out of the beer. And for me, it's quite an interesting one, this. It has got a little bit of a darker sort of grapefruity, passion fruity note to this beer. If you go to the back of the that oily bubble that I'm talking about, you get a little touch of grapefruit, a little bit of a passion fruity note there. But as you come further forward, you start to get the mangoes and the more pineapple-y notes out of this beer as well. But when you progress further into the aftertaste, you can get a little bit of an almost peary, very slightly sort of watermelony, kind of candied, sweety sort of flavour out of this one, which again is quite interesting. I do want to say there is a touch of a kind of kiwi flavour to this one as well. I really don't know what it is about the Denali, but I just always got the impression that it was a kind of kiwi flavour that was coming out of this one. But it really mixes in very well with the sort of piney resinous quality of the beer. I think the Denali is one of these hops that is quite dominant when you put it in to beer, so it's one that you have to be a bit respectful with, if you like. I think the Denali is maybe one of the hops that is a bit better suited to the West Coast IPAs than it is to the New England ones, right enough, because if you're going to do a New England IPA, you want it to be nice and juicy. You don't really want the beer to be all that kind of dank, if you like. But maybe this is the start of a new trend or something like that. But beer is always subjective. But the Denali hop, I would still say, is one that I have to be convinced by. El Dorado, I know. Victoria's Secret, I know quite well. But Victoria's Secret is getting dropped quite a bit recently in favour of Galaxy, right enough. But it's an interesting beer, this one, and it certainly has made me think a little bit more about the New England style. So if you miss the West Coast sort of dankness and bitterness, but you still like the New England IPAs, then this is one I think that could sort of fill a corner for you. But as I say, for me, I'm just not quite convinced by that Denali hop yet. But they've got a really solid base to this beer here. I think if you took the Denali out of this and just had it as El Dorado and Victoria's Secret, it's one of these things I probably would be really raving about it. The Denali hop, I think, maybe just is not for me. But everything else about the beer, for me, it really works. So I'd be very curious to try some of their other beers and see how I get on with those. And I'm not saying, I just don't like the hop, but you can tell that this is a really nice beer, this one, and it's really quite well done. So these guys, I think, do have a bright future ahead of them. So just keep that in mind with this beer. In terms of the mouthfeel then, I would say this beer is mid-bodied. Carbonation is very, very smooth. The mouthfeel overall, I I'd say it's leaning towards the creamy kind of side of things, but this beer does have a good little bit of IBU to it. So I think this one has a sort of 40, I think this has a, maybe even a 50 IBU. It does have a good little bit of dankness to it that you might not normally expect from a New England IPA. The malt base leans towards the sweeter side of things. The palate, the middle of your palate actually does dry out a little bit too. The further you go into the beer, you get a little bit more graininess out of it, but it does have a nice kind of juicy, fruity note to it as well that becomes a little bit more complex the further into the aftertaste that you go. But really, the aftertaste, it's all about those kind of big, piney and spicy floral resins, which is the Denali coming out. So for me, as I said, this is an interesting beer, and you can tell that it's been well crafted, but just, as I always say, beer is subjective. The Denali hop, I think, is one for me that maybe just doesn't work in the New England IPAs, because that's two beers now that I've had where I've sort of had that similar opinion. So I maybe need to try one or two more and just see if that position holds. But I think it's quite a dominant hop that you should really use more in a West Coast IPA, and you can kind of balance it out a little bit more with some of the sweeter caramels and things like that in a West Coast IPA that you can't really do that well in a New England IPA. But the beer itself is a solid beer. They've got a very good malt base to this one. The way that the yeast is kind of playing into this as well is really nice, and the El Dorado and the Victoria's Secret in this one, the juicy side of the fruit in the beer, this is coming out quite nice. Maybe if they used a little bit of Columbus or something like that, or just instead of the Denali, I don't know. But to me, this is a nice beer, and I certainly, I would probably pick one of their other ones next time. But in terms of trying other beers from this brewery, it does make me pretty curious, and that's what you want from a first taste of a brewery's beer. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this beer. This one is the Mojo IPA from Stone Barrel Brewing in Dublin over in Ireland. For me, a really nice solid beer, this one, but the Denali hop, as I said, just isn't quite for me. It dominates the flavour a little bit too much, I think. But yeah, a really interesting review, this one. I'm glad I was able to review another Irish beer for you here on the channel, and I thank you guys again for watching my videos. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Do let me know your opinion on the Denali hop as well, if you have actually tried that. But yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. This is the Mojo IPA coming in at 6% ABV from Stone Barrel Brewing over in Dublin in Ireland. Really cool to find this beer in Kiosk over in Copenhagen, and hopefully I can get hold of a few more beers from this brewery in the future. But until the next time, Slanger just now, and I'll catch you guys later. Skål.